today's episode, you will hear the story of Stephanie's two children's birth. Stephanie has a very unique story in that she first became a mom when she was 19 and then went on to have her son 8 years later. So what she takes us through first is the birth of her daughter when she was 19. And Stephanie describes her education and the way the hospital approached her birth as being steamrolled over and treated like children. She tells us that she wasn't considered and was told that things would happen if they have to, and this was how it was going to be. Needless to say that this led to Stephanie feeling traumatized by the treatment she received from the hospital as well as the birth that she had. And even though she thought that she was done with children, she found out that she was pregnant with a son when her daughter was 8. And this was both a shock and also an exciting news for her and her partner. And Stephanie takes us through how she broke the news to her daughter and how excited her daughter was. Because of the way that Stephanie's first birth unfolded, she pursued a home birth, and her home birth story is empowering and healing, to say the least. What is extremely beautiful about it is that by going through a home birth and having a private midwife, and because her daughter was 8 at the time and she showed interest in Stephanie's pregnancy and birth, she became very involved in the birth to the point that Stephanie's daughter was present at her son's birth, and she was even in the pool with her holding the mirror so that she could see her baby brother crowning and coming into the world. This is a very truly magical story that you will hear in this episode, and I am so thankful that Stephanie chose to come on my podcast to tell that story. You are listening to Cuppa with a Doula. I'm your host, Alicia, exercise physiologist and doula. And every week I chat with a mum or mum-to-be about all things pregnancy, birth, and parenting. The stories you will hear in this podcast are real and sometimes raw, but they are all told without any taboo. So grab yourself a cuppa, put your earphones in, relax, and enjoy this episode. Hi, Stephanie. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. So let's start at the beginning, even before you conceived your two beautiful children. Did you always want to be a mum?
I did, actually, yeah.
Oh, beautiful.
I've always been really gravitated towards looking after children. It might be because I've got a disabled sister.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but yeah, couldn't wait to be a mum.
Oh, nice. Was your sister younger, older than you?
She's 2.5 years younger than me.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Amazing. And did you grow up with babies around you, or not really? You had your baby sister, but
not necessarily babies. I think I was just surrounded by a lot of younger children.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I was just able to kind of play mum, whether it be intentional or not.
Yeah, and I mean, there's many ways to be maternal, right? Like, you don't have to be with babies. You can be, I guess, a role model for cousins or siblings, or maybe close friends even. So yeah. Amazing. Oh, good. So I guess let's dive into your birth story. So you've got a daughter, and she's now 8.
Yes, 8 years old.
Was she a planned conception?
Not at all. Not
well,
at
at least that's honest.
Yeah, no. So, I was actually 19 when I had my daughter. I turned 20. So she was born in the February, and I turned 20 in the October.
Yeah.
So, luckily for me, I'd gotten engaged the year before. Yeah, and then midway through my first year of uni, I was like, oh, I don't feel well, and found out I was 13 weeks pregnant.
Oh,
So I missed
wow.
the whole first,
Oh,
the whole first section.
how did you find out you were pregnant?
It was literally, I said to my partner, I was like, oh, just quite honestly, I was like, I have to pee all the time. Like, what is this? Like, am I okay? Maybe we should go see a doctor. And he was like, oh, should we do a test? And we did one, and it came back like instantly. And I was like, it says we have to wait 3 minutes. Like, this must be wrong. We'll go see a doctor. And like, I'd only just recently begun seeing this doctor,
Mhm,
and she was like, oh, look, I don't think you are, but I'll send you for an ultrasound.
mhm,
If you're going to see anything, you'll see like a tiny little dot. Like, there won't be anything there really.
mhm,
You might be like 4 to 6 weeks, if anything.
mm.
And no, I saw a whole baby, like hands, feet, little nose, all of it. Yeah. I was like, oh, no, this is a child. So,
Wow. How
yeah.
how did you react to this?
I think my partner and I just kind of like were like, okay, cool. Well, this is. We knew that we'd already discussed children, that we wanted children.
Yeah.
We'd already discussed like what kind of baby names we'd like, and like I said, we got engaged the year before, so we knew that we were committed.
Yeah.
Um, and we were just like, okay, cool, we better get started. I guess. Now I got to tell my mum that I'm not a virgin, so and that's how she found out I was pregnant. So
Mm,
yeah,
cool.
it was a interesting time.
How did your mum react? Actually, was she, I guess, maybe happy and shocked at the same time?
I think like just thoroughly confused.
Yeah.
Um, mostly. There wasn't really any emotion other than just like confused for I think the first like day or two.
Hmm.
Yeah, cause I said to her like, "Oh, come sit down." Cause I went in with the ultrasound. Like, "Oh, I've been to a doctor. I need to show you something." And she's like, "Oh my god, she's sick." And so she's called out to my dad, and my dad instantly knew something was up. So he came in like very apprehensive.
Hmm.
Um, and my mum's like, "Oh, no, like she's so sick," and I was like, kinda, I guess. Depends on how you want to look at it. No, not so much anymore. Ta-da! So, but no, but they were happy for me after the shock wore off.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, good, good, good. Could
Yeah,
you, I guess so at the time you were pregnant with your daughter, it was 2000 and,
I had her in the February of 2014, so
yeah,
2013.
thank you.
Yeah,
Couldn't do math on that one.
yeah, that's
Um,
okay.
how was the access to like birth education and birth classes back then? I'm guessing you would have had maybe the hospital ones and maybe education from your own mom as well.
um, so it was hard because my mum's not like wasn't very maternal at all. She kind of had to
Hmm.
learn to be maternal. So she was like, she couldn't really assist me pregnancy wise, other than just being a support.
Yeah.
So the education I did have was the limited amount that I got from the hospital, and I kind of
Hmm.
took everything at face value because I was so young, and they kind of were very adamant that they were like, "This is what this is, and this is what this is. This is what you're going to do." So we
Hmm.
did have classes that we could attend. I think we went to 3
Yeah.
that were offered, but they weren't offered until like 25
Yeah.
weeks onwards. So, and realistically, probably not. Like, I can't complain because I know a lot of people, they no longer offer it or they don't have those classes to support.
Yeah.
But it wasn't necessarily very eye opening back then. I definitely had to go and try and do lots of googling and find
Hmm.
things out myself.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
but they
Yeah.
showed us like the epidural needles and um, the balloon thingy if you needed an induction and all that sort of thing was shown in
Mm.
one of them. That's the one that's sticking out in my brain. I remember thinking, "Oh my god, that's terrifying."
I mean, that's pretty good that they showed you that because if you've never seen it and you're in full blown labor and you're like, oh, I want the epidural, and they come out with this needle and you're like, okay, no, I don't want the
Exactly.
epidural anymore.
And
Yeah.
a lot of women don't know that you have that tube in your back that
Mhm.
you then have the button or whatever it is. You only get to press it once every whatever. Like, you can press it as much as you want, and it comes out every now and then.
That's right.
Um, but like, the amount of women I spoke to, even when I was pregnant with my daughter, who I was like, "Oh my god, like I have a needle phobia." And so I was like, I don't think I'm going to get it. I did, but I didn't think I was going to get it. And I'm like, and the idea that there's this tube in your back, like, this is disgusting. How is it hygienic? Like,
Mhm.
what do we do? And they were like, what do you mean tube? And I'm like, did you not? When they brought out the needle, the second thing they brought out was a teeny tiny little thin tubey thing. And they were like, oh my God. So, yes,
See, it's
interesting
funny in
education.
retrospect, the like getting the same birth education, but women taking different things away. So, like you obviously sewed
Yes.
the needle and you sewed the tube. Another woman might have just seen the needle and gone, "Okay, yeah, I'm not getting the epidural now,"
Yeah,
and
exactly.
that's it.
Just like shut off from that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's it.
So
That's so funny.
I think also, like, especially because there were quite a few young mums when I was
Hmm.
in those classes too. And I think because you are sitting there for like, I think it was between 20 to 30 minutes,
Yeah.
you were getting kind of like an onslaught of information that
Hmm.
we weren't given like printouts or brochures or
Oh,
any like
right.
tangible
Hmm.
physical things to like then go, okay, I've kind of processed what I've heard, but I actually need to read it and comprehend.
Yeah.
And so I think it was hard for a lot of people being like, you can only comprehend so much at one sitting
Hmm.
without them becoming so overstimulated.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, you're right. And this is something I learned at uni. Actually, I think if I remember it correctly, it's over like an hour of like you sitting in a lecture theater or a tutorial. You actually retain like 7 minutes of information.
Yeah,
Like that's it,
yeah.
right?
And, and you're like, but I'm here the whole time. I've been listening. You're like, yeah, no.
Yeah, but I mean, as you said, it's the exact same thing. It's just all this information that's dumped on you, and if it's news, like you don't know anything, you're trying to process the vocabulary, the new, like the epidural and everything. And at the same
That's it.
time, you're trying to remember it. So you're learning and you've also got to remember, which is too hard. Obviously, you can only do one or the other at any given time. So
That's it.
that's
And
really
then you're
hard.
also sitting there thinking, does this work for me? Does this work with what I think I would want
Exactly.
from my body and my child? And so you just have so much happening at once. So
Yeah, right. So back when you were pregnant with your daughter, uh, were you, I guess, were you given any options, like in terms of your care, or were you kind of told, well, you'd birth at the hospital and you might want to do shared care with your GP and a midwife, or were you
I
given any
wasn't actually
options?
really given any alternate information. So
Mm-hmm.
all I knew was you go to the hospital and that's where you have your child.
Mm-mm.
Um, I knew that some people had home births, but I
Yep.
didn't actually think it was something that was actually accessible to me.
Yep.
So um, I looked up water births because I was like, I don't, like I said, I have needle phobia. So I was like, I don't particularly want to have this giant needle in me unless I need to. But I also know that if I stub my toe, like I'm down for the count. I've got terrible pain management. So I was like, am I going to be able to handle this?
Mm-hmm.
I have anxiety. So, like, am I going to have
Mm-hmm.
a anxiety attack during labor? Um, and so I looked up water birth, and I know Ipswich Hospital had a birth pool. I don't know if they still do,
Mm-hmm.
but they had one 8 years ago. And I remember saying to them, like, oh, is this an option for me? And they said, no,
Mm-hmm.
you're too young. This is not something that's going to be available for you. And I was like,
Because
oh,
of your
okay. Like,
age.
I was told because of my age. And
Oh.
I thought, like, oh, okay, like, is there anything I can do to, can I speak to someone? Like, can
Mm-hmm.
an exemption be made? And I was told, no, this is what you need to do. Um, and I had, like, no health concerns. My pregnancy with my daughter was actually really wonderful. I actually enjoyed
Mm-hmm.
being pregnant up until about 36 weeks when you're ready for them to be
Yep.
out. But,
Yep.
like, I had a really good pregnancy. Like I said, like, I didn't find out until I was 13 weeks. So
Yep.
I kind of had a pretty cruisy time. But yeah, I was told, like, nope, you're going to a hospital. You're gonna have whatever pain relief you want to have,
Mm-hmm.
probably an epidural. So I had pretty much been told by the people I was seeing at the hospital, like, an epidural is probably best for you because you've got no pain management skills, and that's what's going to happen when you get here.
Mm. So they knew better than you what pain relief you'd want. Interesting.
Yeah, yeah, pretty
Mm-hmm.
much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Um, sorry, I'm still trying to digest the fact that you're too young for water birth. I'm just trying to understand it because I just can't.
Yeah.
Um, so outside of this
Yeah.
statement that you're obviously too young for water birth, were you treated differently because you were 19 at the time?
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was steamrolled over constantly, and because obviously my
Mm-hmm.
partner was 18 at the time,
Mm-hmm.
we were treated like we were children. So it was very much like, you don't know what you're talking about. Your
Mm-hmm.
opinion doesn't necessarily have any weight.
Mm.
Um, one of the things I'd spoken about with them with my birth plan was I do
Mm-hmm.
not want the use of forceps or like the suction thingy.
Yep. Yep.
It's not something that I want to do. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I've heard too many horror stories and looked at too much research that shows that it causes trauma to both bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And I was told, well, if your child needs to come out and they're stuck, that is what's going to happen. And so thankfully that didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, it was very much you don't know what you're talking about because you're too young, rather than what can we do to educate you so
Mm-hmm.
that you have the best birth possible, make our job easier, because the last thing you want is someone freaking out because they're completely clueless going into everything.
Mm-hmm.
Then, like placenta. Didn't know placenta was a thing until the day before I went into labor
Mm-hmm. Okay.
because there wasn't that education.
And that's right. You don't know what you don't know if you're not being told. You know, this is a baby, and when you do the ultrasound, you can see the placenta, and this is the role of the placenta, and you've got to birth it
Yep.
after you birth the baby. If you're not told that, you're not going to guess it.
Don't
That's for
know.
sure.
Exactly.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's
And so then,
shocking.
like, I felt silly because I was like, oh, sorry, I didn't know. And they were like, how did you not know? And I'm like, I just didn't. Like, sorry.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm not a unicorn. I don't know what I don't know. That's how it is, really. Wow.
That's it.
Ah, that's really sad. I mean, that was 8 years ago. Maybe things have changed now, but that's really sad that you were treated differently because you were young. And I mean, you were 19. You were not 15. That
That's
to
it.
me
Yeah.
is different. In saying that some 15-year-old are very responsible, but I mean, once you're pregnant, what good is it going to do to tell a woman, oh, look, you don't know what you're doing. We'll decide for you what pain management you need, and yeah, we'll just do that regardless of what you want. That doesn't make
Yeah.
for a good experience, and birth trauma, arises from those situations.
That's
That's
it. Yeah.
oh,
It's
wow.
very much the difference between my two births was
Hmm.
one I was treated like an incubator and one I was
Hmm.
treated like a birthing mother.
Hmm.
I was treated
Hmm.
like someone who was having a child as opposed to the person housing a child, I guess, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I've
Hmm.
heard that there have been major improvements, but I know that there were definitely, I was not the only one who was like, hey,
Hmm.
I think some things could be improved.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. And see, that's really sad. But I mean, what can you do, right?
Nothing really. That's it.
Yeah.
You just have to go with the flow.
Yeah. Look, and I mean, I think what's the hardest is even as a first time mom, regardless of your age, right? It's hard to stand up for yourself because sometimes you've never gone through pregnancy, you've never gone through labor or birth. You don't know, what you don't know.
Yeah.
And this, I feel like this is something I talk about in almost every single episode. The role and the authority that doctors have and how we perceive them as, well, they know better because they're doctors. Same with midwives, right? They know better because
Yes.
they've
Yeah.
studied that, they've done have many births. Yet it's your body, and you actually know if you're in pain. You actually know if it hurts. You know if baby is kicking differently. You know those things. They
Yes.
don't.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean that,
Having to
and
having to learn to trust your body, and then being able
yes,
to advocate for that
yeah.
was something I had to learn and be encouraged by my midwife this time around. She was like, "You're in charge here." She's
Mm-hmm,
like,
mm-hmm.
"Yeah, I have the training, and yes, I've had many many births over many many years, but every person's different, every body is different." And she's like, "That's why." Oh, she was very much. Her name was Trish. So Trish was very much someone who said that she was not going to cause me the same sort of
Mhm.
birth trauma that I
Mhm.
had at the hospital,
Amazing.
because
Yeah.
that's her thing. She believes every woman should be advocating.
Yeah, that's right. And see, there are midwives like Trish out there that wouldn't treat a younger mom any different to an older mom. They would just treat each mom as they come and meet them at their level and educate them on anything they want, meet them where their knowledge is, and answer any questions without any judgment. And I'm sure there are
That's
plenty
it.
of them out there. So,
Yeah.
so how did you feel, and I guess also how did you both feel about the birth as it was, it was coming up soon? Did you feel scared, ready, unprepared?
Um, I think my partner and I were just both really excited. Like,
Yeah,
he was probably more apprehensive than I was, not because he didn't want to have a child, but because he was like, we are not ready for children, even though like we're kind of like mentally ready. Physically,
yeah,
we were renting like this teeny tiny little like cottage
yeah.
that had been like, it used to have a wraparound veranda that had been
Hmm.
built in. So our bathroom was like this tiny little corridor. Like, it was this teeny tiny house, and we were like, we're gonna have a child here soon. You know, he was working nights, so like he wasn't always at home. So he was like,
Yeah,
is this going to, like, should I change jobs before Bub comes, or like
yeah.
afterwards? So, he had all these questions going on whilst also being excited. Whereas I think I was
Yeah.
mostly just like, cool, I'm ready. Like, just kind of fell into mum mode, I guess. I was just
Hmm.
like, okay, cool. Well, what do I need to do to be as ready as I can
Yeah.
with what limited resources I had at the time?
Yeah, and see, I think that makes for a great story, now 8 years later, where, you talk about your first home being really tiny and you're like, oh, I'm not sure how that's
Yes.
going to work, to now, having a bigger house and probably not renting anymore. And it just makes for a great story at the time, I think.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're still renting, but like
Oh,
we
okay.
do at least have we at least have a house where like she has a room that she has, space to
Yeah.
put things in, not just there's a bookshelf and a cot. Like, there's actually room to have possessions and do things now.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, look, and I mean, what do babies need anyway? They need their mom and their dad, or their mom and their partner,
Yep,
the
that's
other
it.
half, and then they need food. They need to be warm, and they need the nappy changed. That's about it.
That's it.
Yeah.
They're like a really fancy house plant is how I explained it to my daughter when I was pregnant. I said, you just need to make sure that they're loved, they get
Hmm.
sunshine, they get enough water or food, and that they're clean.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and
Good.
then you just hope they grow well.
It's like a
So
plant.
she was like, okay,
It sounds like you're
fancy house
growing a
plant.
plant at this point.
Yeah, that's it. So that's how we described it, a fancy house plant, just to help her understand, I guess, what the initial needs of a child were going to be.
Yeah, yeah, and that's right. That is the best way you could put it. That is all that a newborn needs, and then they need a lot of sleep. That's that's
Yep.
the other thing they
Yep.
do. Yeah, perfect. So, how was the days leading up to the birth? Did you have a spontaneous labor?
So I'd gone into the hospital. I'm trying to think. So I gave birth at 40 weeks plus 5.
Hmm.
Um, so I think I went in at 40 weeks because they wanted me to come
Hmm.
up for a checkup. And they went, oh, look, you're 40 weeks. We're going to give you a stretch and sweep. And I was like, oh, like,
Mm,
do we need to? And they're like, yes, we don't want you to
mm.
go too far over 40 weeks, um, because otherwise, then you start looking at your baby being, too cooked, I guess, so to speak. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I had not one but two stretch and sweeps. I had one on 40 weeks and one on
Oh, wow.
40 weeks plus 2 days.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and I think that must have kind of begun rushing my
Hmm.
labor. Um, yeah, because I went up on. So my daughter was born on the Sunday morning, and yeah, so I
Hmm.
went up on the Saturday morning, and I was like, I'm in a lot of pain, but I
Hmm.
know they're Braxton Hicks. I'm just
Yeah.
uncomfortable, and they were like,
Hmm.
okay, cool. We'll give you some pain medication, make you go to like help you sleep, and then come up tomorrow morning. And so I actually didn't experience any early labor, realistically, other than
Hmm.
Braxton Hicks. I went up at
Hmm.
8 a.m. on the Saturday. I had um, they gave me 2 shots of morphine to my thigh. I went to sleep for a few hours, and then I woke up, and they were like, "Cool, um, we're going to see if your waters are broke. And I was like, oh, I think I'm weeing myself. Like, I don't
Mhm.
feel right. And I mean, I will never forget, there were two nurses in the room, and they were betting a sandwich over whether or not my waters are broken. And like, they're like, I bet you one Subway that like that her waters haven't broken. And she's like, well, I raised you, I raised you this, and like they ended up finished breaking my waters for me. But I'll never forget being like, guys, can you focus? Like,
Wow. Okay.
I understand you're hungry, but like, I'm possibly having my child here.
Yeah. A bit of respect. Thank you.
That's it. And like, they were lovely. Like, I can't fault them. Like, I was
Yeah.
just kind of like in this little cupboard of a room. Like, literally, there was a bed and a window and a door. Like, that was like it was this tiny room they'd put me into to sleep in. She's like, yeah, broke my waters and then rang my partner and we're like, hey, we're going to give her an epidural.
Mhm.
So I had my epidural, and then they gave me gas, and then
Okay. Yeah.
that was at 3 o'clock, and then I had my daughter at 1 a.m.
Wow.
I was just on my back for a few hours, just chilling.
Wow.
But yeah,
How did you go
didn't have
with
any
the?
labor.
Yeah. Okay. How did you go with the epidural? Because you've got that phobia of needles, but I guess if you're not seeing it, does it help?
Unfortunately, I'm a bit like a toddler. Actually, no, toddlers are probably more brave. I'm very much like crying in the waiting room before we've even got there.
Mhm.
Like, I have to say to them, like, give me warning because I might flinch.
Mhm.
Like, I
Yeah.
don't want to like hurt, and I do. I flinch quite violently, so I have to be like, ready, 1, 2, 3, it's going into your skin.
Mhm.
Which always amuses people who have to give me any sort of shots or blood tests because they're like, my goodness. Because Serena's wonderful with needles. She'll just sit there and do what she needs to do, and I'm crying, and it's not even me. So with my epidural, they had to like, I think Luke was sitting on a chair in front of me, and was leaning over like a
Mhm.
ball or something on the bed.
Mhm.
Um, and so I had one nurse who was like rubbing my back and counting me down, and the other
Mhm.
nurse, well, I can't remember what the name of the person is who does the needle. Um, I can't fault them. They were like, "This is what's happening now. Make sure you breathe in. If you're having a contraction, let us know, because if you move, we can damage you." So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, no, because the actual process of getting the epidural was like not pleasant because it's a needle.
Mhm.
Um, but it wasn't, I think, the horror story that I envisioned in my head that it would be, kind of just getting
Mhm. Mhm.
jabbed with this with this big needle. But
Mm.
yeah,
But see,
was what it
I
was, I
think
guess.
the way you're describing that you need warning, you need to be told the steps, you need to be told, when they're going to do it. I feel like, it's not childish in any way. I feel like it's good practice because like it's best practice for, nurses, anesthesiologists, doctors, because some women need to be told, they want that information, and
Yeah,
it's a way to prepare yourself, whether you have phobia or you don't, like if we're talking about a cesarean, some women want to know, when the incision is being made, and when they're cutting through the uterus and when the baby is being pulled out, because
that's
it
it.
gives them empowerment, so they're not just
That's it.
laying there. They feel like they are part of it, and obviously they are part of
That's
it.
it.
But
Yeah,
some women don't want the details, and that's fine. Others do because that's
yeah,
how they are. So I feel like that's good
yeah,
practice for medical professionals to anyway tell you and help you through your phobia. And you did really well for someone who's got a phobia of needles to get an epidural. That's really big.
I won't lie. I was very impressed with myself. That's with my
Yeah, you
partner.
would
I
be.
did like I gotta say, like, I was sobbing the whole time, but like I didn't move, so
Doesn't matter.
that counts. I
Yeah,
feel
of
like
course.
too with epidurals and things like that. Even like your blood tests along the way during your pregnancy.
Hmm.
Obviously, they do better when you're relaxed, or at least that part of whatever body, like with your arm, try and relax that hand or whatever it is. Um, and I think giving the autonomy back to women to be like,
Yeah.
hey, look, this is what's gonna happen.
Hmm.
These are the steps, or these are the things that would help us help you.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so I do find, because I have to have it explained to me, being that it's counting down, I then have to concentrate on relaxing my muscles so that I'm not tight. Otherwise,
Hmm.
that's when like your needles hurt more
Yeah.
because they're trying to. get through everything else while you're like in the corner. So, you know, yeah. But like, it's interesting what you said about C-sections. I've never even thought about it, but you would
Yeah.
100% want to be part of the process rather than the process part of you.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, for some women it's getting the description of that, and for others it's they don't want to know because maybe that's too graphic for them, or they just can't handle that type of information.
Yeah,
And yeah, but yeah, it's definitely something that is possible, and I feel like it should be asked before the cesarean is performed. I don't know if it always is, but I feel like it should be an option at least where you can say yes or no.
yeah, I agree. Yeah, 100%. Especially because it's such a scary thing, especially if it's not planned.
Yeah.
You can't imagine. I can't even imagine how I would have felt in that moment if they said, "Look, for whatever reason, we're needing to take you in and do this." Like, all your plans would be out the window. So I can't even imagine.
Yeah, and
All the props to mums who've had to do it.
yeah, exactly. And I think what's really, I guess, for me, the way I imagine it being scary if you're not prepared for it, because you're in this, I guess, colder environment with a lot more, nurses and doctors, and you've got a surgeon, you've got the anesthesiologist, and there's just a lot more people in the room, really, and usually they put the drape so you can't see. I mean, some women might want to see, others definitely don't.
Yeah.
But you just can't. And then sometimes you've got your arms, like, in a cross way that are, like, I don't want to say tied up, but they're restrained.
Oh,
Um,
really? I had no idea.
yeah, I think, but I'm actually not sure. I need to look up why again. I feel like it's got something to do with the I want to say it's
Like a
either the epidural or sometimes they do a spinal block, but I'm actually not 100% sure if that's right. And the fact that your
yeah,
arms can flop, I think,
yeah,
something along those lines, but I'm actually not 100% confident in my answer. So
yeah. Or like a startle reflex, maybe even.
maybe.
That
Yeah.
that would be me. I'd be like, oh, they'd be like, woman.
So coming back to your birth, so you got the epidural, you initially got morphine, you got the gas,
Yep,
and then it came time to pushing, right? How was that?
yep. Interesting because my epidural worked really well. I couldn't
Yeah.
feel anything, like they say, like, chest down. But for whatever reason, my right leg kept falling off the bed. And then because you can't lift yourself, it's dead weight. So I was just slowly following my leg. So a few times I had to kind of like put me back on the bed because I was just slowly like, I can feel myself falling and I literally can't do anything about it. Um, so they eventually put me like, I don't know what they're called, like when they put your legs up in the metal
Oh, in the
thingy,
stirrups.
stirrups, that's it. So they ended up doing that because my leg was just flop, flopping off the table. um, which, like, there was a student midwife in my room, so like bless her. I can't remember her name, but she was lovely. Um, and I think like she didn't want to have to kind of like shove my leg back on, so she kind of kept placing it. And
Yeah.
so I'd be like, they're like, try and push, and I'm like, I can't. I'm distracted. My leg is falling off the bed again. So, but like, I couldn't feel anything. So they were like, "Can you push?" And I'm like, I don't know if I'm pushing. I don't know
Hmm.
if my body's pushing. I literally can't. I couldn't even feel pressure. The only pressure I felt was when Bob was like when Serena was crowning, um,
Yeah.
and it was like a burning sensation. So I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, this is like that, the Ring of Fire or whatever they call it."
Yeah.
Um, and they said to me, "You need to stop pushing." And I said, "Well, I don't even know if I'm pushing, so I can't stop.
Yeah.
I can't stop pushing." And
Hmm.
so they were like, "Okay, you've stopped, but like she's kind of gone back in a little bit." And
Hmm.
so I got an episiotomy. So
Oh.
and I remember because my eyes were closed, I wasn't asked, and they didn't ask Luke, my partner. And so I had my eyes closed, and I just heard this snap noise. And I opened my eyes, and I looked at Luke, and I was like, "What's that?" And he went, "Nothing, sweetheart. Close your eyes again." Like, because he was like, "How do you tell your partner they've just cut you with these big scissors?" So I didn't actually even know until they had to sew me up afterwards that I even got an episiotomy. Um,
Wow.
but yeah, she eventually, like, she said to me, "Can you push my hand out?" That was the exact phrase. I will never forget it. And I remember thinking, "Excuse me, um, can I push your hand out of what?" And she was like, "I'm putting pressure on your like internal muscles around Bub's head to try and encourage you to push further." And so, yeah, Bub came out. Bub, of course, was born in meconium because it was quite a stressful labour.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was immediately rushed off with Luke. They went and cleared her
Mm-hmm.
out and then gave her a bath with Luke.
Mm-hmm.
And so my first 15, 20 minutes of after having Serena, I was getting stitched up and didn't know where my daughter was. I was so out of it. Had no idea. And then they're like, "Oh, that now you got to birth the placenta." So like that, thankfully, like I had no trouble. I've heard
Mm-hmm.
people have had trouble in the past. So like within 20 minutes or so, I birthed the placenta.
Mm-hmm.
And then they brought my daughter back to me, because we didn't find out the gender.
Okay,
They're
yeah.
like, held her little private parts in my face, and they're like, "What is it?" And I was like, "I don't know." Like, what are you showing me? Like, because you know how like out of it you are after you give
Yeah.
birth, like you've just had this massive marathon. And I'd had all these sorts of medications and whatever. I was exhausted. And they're like, "You got a little girl," and I was like, "Oh, wonderful." So breastfed her for the first time, and then got to stay with her from then on. But it was certainly not the birth and labor that Luke and I envisioned. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I can't necessarily complain because I know that some people have had like people hemorrhage, or like
Mm-hmm.
there's all these awful things that could happen, or even happen to have an
Yeah.
emergency C-section. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, definitely it's a little bit of birth trauma related to, related to Serena, but thankful she's
Yes.
here.
Yeah, no, of course. And I mean, you
Sorry.
don't you don't need
Sorry.
you don't need to have um you don't need to have a really bad experience for you to say, "Oh, I didn't get the birth I wanted and now I have to grieve not getting that birth," right? Because the first time you birth is obviously extremely special. It's the first time you're doing it, and you don't
Yeah.
get a do over, right? And
No,
that's
that's
how
it.
it stays like in your head, and that's the story of Serena being born and brought into this world, right? So, I mean, like, yes, of course, you can say, "I'm disappointed," or "This is not the birth I wanted." Obviously, it's how it unfolded. Birth trauma, yes, I can hear that, especially in the fact that you didn't get asked if you wanted an episiotomy. It got
Yeah, no. I didn't
brought
even know
on
it was a
you.
thing until after I had one. I didn't know that it was an option until I was like, "So why did I get cut?" And they're like, "Oh, well, this is something we do if we think that women's labor are going on too long." So, yeah,
That's
I had no idea that it was even a thing. And so
wow.
I was like, you know, my poor poor partner, like poor Luke, just being like, and obviously because I had my eyes closed, I was trying to concentrate on
Yeah.
pushing through a body that had no sensation. Um, that he witnessed it and had to kind of say to me like, he knew that if I knew I'd freak out, so he had to kind of just be like, "Don't worry about it. I'll
Yeah,
help you
but I
deal with the
mean,
trauma of that later."
oh gosh, I mean, just because you've got your eyes closed does not give permission to anyone to cut you or palpate the muscles around, the internal pelvic floor muscles or any other muscles in
Yep,
there, without asking you a question. You were not in a coma. They could have asked you,
that's
"Would you
it.
consent to this because blah blah blah?" They could have
That's it.
asked.
Or even like because like I said, I kind of been like semi dictated to because of my age at the time.
Mm,
Even if they were like, "This is important because Bub's in distress,"
yep.
like I probably would have been like, "Okay,"
Yeah,
because
that's
A, I
it.
would have had
And
no education otherwise, and B, well, this is obviously your job, so I'm going to trust you to the
mhm,
best of your ability help my baby come into this world as safely as possible. So yeah, but like, I knew none of it, no idea until afterwards when they were sewing me up, and I was like, "So why was that a thing? Like, why is this happening?" And they were like, "Oh, well, we had to." And I ended up having like I think 10 people in the room or something. I had a student midwife, I
mhm,
had like multiple like I think I had nurses come in at one stage. There was someone in there purely to use the machine that helped clean out Serena's mouth and stuff because she was born
mhm.
in meconium.
Yeah.
So I had like opened my eyes to a room full of people, and I was like, "Oh hey,
Wow.
when did you get here?"
Gosh. Wow. That just sounds like it does sound really traumatic. And I'm really blown away by, yeah, the fact that they thought they knew better than you, and to the point that they just don't even ask anything. They don't even tell you what's happening. They will just do it. And that is just
Yeah,
not acceptable for
yeah,
anyone, regardless of age. Age is not even a thing. You're a human, you
it
can
isn't at all. That's
comprehend
right.
things. If they say, oh, we would like to do this because, you can comprehend it. Your age does not even matter at this stage. And
That's
it's
it.
outrageous to be doing that. And to, I mean, I want to say that they've put themselves in a superior position and basically considered that they knew better than you, that, even though it's your body, they've got control over it somehow, and that they can do
Yeah,
whatever they feel is right.
that's it. Yeah, and it's
Wow.
hard too because like I think it wasn't really until this pregnancy with my son that I even
Hmm.
realized, I guess, like the misuse of power, I
Yeah.
guess, if
Hmm.
that's the
Hmm.
correct way to say it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a
Because
good way to put
obviously
it.
you put
Mm.
your entire trust in health professionals because you don't
Hmm.
have the training. And I'm not
Hmm.
ever going to say, like, oh, well, I Googled this because
Hmm.
obviously Dr. Google's not your friend. So you do put a lot of your trust into whatever they say. Um, and so in those moments, I'm like, oh, well, this must have been a thing. And it really wasn't until this pregnancy that I went, oh, yeah, that is weird that I wasn't actually
Hmm.
I didn't consent to anything because my midwife, she was horrified. She was like, "What do you mean?"
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, is this not normal?" She's like, no, honey, that's not that's not a normal thing
Wow.
to happen."
Wow. That
Yeah,
just makes me, oh, it just makes me really angry for you, because, that's just not best practice. And you doctors, yes, they've done the training, yes, they've helped women birth and all of that, but they don't know better than the woman. They can say, oh,
yeah,
we're observing that your baby is in distress, it would be best for us to do this. Do you consent to it? And there is always time, even in an emergency, there's always time
to ask
to
that. Yeah,
verbalize it and to ask. Like, I refuse to believe that in an emergency, there is no time to say, we need to take you into theater, for example, and we need to get this baby out now because the heart rate is dropping really low. There's always
that's
time
it.
to verbalize it to me. And asking for consent is, it's everything. It's
Yeah,
your body. Like, you wouldn't, your GP should not, and shouldn't touch you without your consent, right? Let
that's it.
alone do any internal touches, which is extremely
That's it.
invasive.
Yeah, yeah,
So why is a midwife, doctor, nurse allowed to do it? That's
that's
no.
it. I don't. And that's the thing. Like, you don't question it at the time
Mm.
necessarily because you're like, well, why would I question?
Yeah,
Obviously, the forefront of my brain was, oh, well, they did everything they could to keep my daughter
yeah,
safe. And they did. Like, I
yeah,
can't fault them for that. But definitely, like, looking back, I'm like, it would have been nothing to be like, Bub's in distress, we're
yeah,
doing this.
yeah.
Like,
That's
and
right.
I would have been
That's
like,
right.
cool. Even just to say it to Luke. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
even
hmm,
though like,
of
that's
course.
still not speaking to me, it's at least giving a power to the parents of this
Hmm, of
child.
course. Yeah,
And he wasn't asked at all either. So,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And see, I did a really powerful episode on the non-respect of consent, and you have a voice. It's your body, and you know better than anyone. And, like, obviously, you don't know what you don't know, and also what you're living is your reality. So you don't know that this
that's
is not
it.
everyone's reality, and that's really hard. And that's why, as you said, you thought, well, they did everything they can. The doctors, they're here to help me. My baby was delivered safely. Yes, however, you can still say, look, I can't fault them for the fact that they brought my daughter into the world safely. However, I
That's
can
it.
say that they didn't ask for consent and they performed a medical procedure without me knowing. and without
That's it.
anyone knowing what was happening, and that's not normal.
That's it. It's like, and it's not even saying it's against your will because you have no idea it's even happening.
Hmm.
So, but I think it comes down to, you and I discussed this a bit earlier, that like sexual education,
Yeah,
consent is a massive part of sex education,
yeah,
and it's so poor, especially like I want to say, like, especially in Queensland, it's really, really poor the way that they do sex education, and actually being able to discuss like consent in
yeah.
any situation
Hmm.
is so important, that it comes down to not only obviously during sexual encounters or during intimacy, but in all aspects of life. And
Yeah,
so I think that relates to that as well, because that then, you don't know that you can say no, or that you
yeah,
can say, I want more information on this.
yeah. Exactly,
So
exactly. And something I was talking about in a previous episode was the acronym BRAIN, which is really relevant to any procedures, pregnancy, any surgical intervention, anything in life. And so BRAIN stands for benefits, risk, alternatives, intuition, and nothing. So it's basically asking,
I have heard
what are
this.
the
Trish spoke to me about it.
oh, amazing, oh,
My midwife.
amazing. Oh, see, she's good. That's
Yeah,
great.
she's
So
wonderful.
yeah,
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just like, I've heard this. Yes.
yeah,
Sorry.
exactly. So it's asking, oh, a doctor recommends an intervention, for example. So it's saying, okay, what are the benefits of doing this? What are the potential risks? And then thinking to yourself, what is my intuition telling me? Do I want to have this intervention, or do I feel like, no, actually, I don't really want this? Asking the doctor if there is any other options, because usually there is, but sometimes they will go to the most direct thing, or they will try and get what they want. And then also asking, and I think that's a really important question, asking, what happens if I do nothing? What happens if I don't get
Yes.
this intervention? And I think that's a really powerful question, especially, in this space where we're talking about pregnancy, but we're also talking about when baby's born. And for example, the doctor says, oh, we need to do this, I don't know, test, intervention to your baby because blah, blah, blah. Great to ask those questions. And just,
That's it.
yeah, and it's not anything, like, you're not questioning their
Sorry.
authority. You're just trying to be as informed as you can, so that you understand what's being done either to you or to your baby, and you can make an informed decision, because informed decision and informed consent implies that you know what the intervention is, you know what the risks are, and you understand what could be done instead of it, and you also know what could happen if you don't do this, and therefore you make a decision for yourself because you have all the pieces of the puzzles.
That's it. 100%. And I think that it needs to be something that's more recognized, that you're allowed to have those discussions, regardless
Exactly.
of your gender, your culture, your age, your
Yep.
sexuality, anything.
Yep.
Because I think a lot of people think, I mean, and I'm speaking generalized here, but a
Yep.
lot of the women that I know who've had children have been like, we wish that we knew that we could have said, actually, I
Yep.
don't want to do this. Like
Yep.
myself being able to say, I don't want to stretch and sweep, let alone two.
Yep.
Like being able to say, like, that's not actually something that I think that I want or need.
Yep.
Um, and that if that's something that I wanted, that I can then discuss it with them
Yep.
at a separate time or whatever
Yeah.
else. Yeah.
Exactly. And see, that's something I'm hearing a lot, the fact that women don't know they can say no, or they can, for example, if we're talking about an induction, and for example, inductions have, a place, obviously, but sometimes you're just not ready. So the doctor says, oh, we will do an induction at 41 plus 3. And when you reach that date, you go, actually, I'm not ready. I'm just not in that space. I don't feel like having one. Well, you can say that. You can say, look, at this point, I'm not feeling ready. Can we push it out? And you
Exactly.
have
Yeah.
a right to decline an induction regardless anyway. I mean, the hospital sometimes doesn't like it, but they can't force you to have an induction. They can't. I had a guest just before said they're not going to bring the police to your house if you don't show up for an induction, and that's right.
Yeah, that's it.
What
Yeah.
are they going to do? Yeah, and it's something, as you said, we're not being told that. It's good to question, but we just don't know that we can, and that's something that's really sad in today's society. It's yeah, I
I
don't.
think I think people fear being combative
Yeah, mm-hmm,
rather than questioning and
mm-hmm.
inquisitive.
That's right. I think you've put it beautifully, actually. I didn't know how to put it. So, yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it is. Because you can question in basically for you to be educated, for you to understand without being rebellious or trying to fight the system. You're just trying to
Yeah,
do what's best for you. And especially when you're pregnant and, you're growing another human being, you want to know what's going to happen to you, but also what's going to happen to the baby. Um,
that's it.
you've got a lot of decisions to make, and yeah, it's about knowing what is best for you and understanding it so you can make the best decision that is suited to you, to your circumstances.
That's it. To your
Yeah,
child, because every child's different too.
exactly. That's right.
So
That is right.
yeah,
So how was so after this birth, how was your postpartum journey? So you started breastfeeding straight away. How did
yeah.
it all go?
I was very lucky that my breastfeeding journey with my daughter was really easy.
Hmm.
Um, she did the whole little crawl down, and then she just was attached ever since. She was she was great. Like she was able to. I didn't have any issues with latching
Yeah.
or anything like that. I was quite lucky in the sense that a friend of mine at the time, her mum was a lactation consultant,
Yeah.
so I was able to say to her, "Hey, can I get you to come over and just double check
Oh,
that
amazing.
everything's all good?" And she was like, "Nope, you're a natural." And I was like, "Fabulous, awesome," and was able to kind of go through that. Um, and Luke was able to stay home with me, I think, for the first week, um,
Hmm.
so that we could get into the routine of obviously I wasn't, I had stitches, so like
Yeah.
adjusting to being like, obviously you're a bit sore after birth naturally, usually, but having any like tears or stitches or anything like that is a little extra added bit of like, oh, I'm gonna try and get out of bed and I hurt.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
adjusting to all of that. But I've got to say I was quite lucky in the sense that I didn't really trying to think of how to word it. Like the baby blues, I was warned like baby blues are gonna get you, like they come at like that day three. Day three is when you get your baby blues because that's when your milk comes in, that's when your hormones change.
Hmm.
And yeah, I had quite bad anxiety at the
Hmm.
back then, and so I was told like you really need to be
Hmm.
110% on top of this, and I was like, yep, cool. And then nothing happened, and I remember thinking, oh my goodness, and then I had such mad anxiety waiting for me to lose it,
Oh, oh
waiting for the
no.
sadness to hit, and it wasn't until I think Serena was like 3 weeks old was my first day of like I'm overwhelmed and sleep deprived and I cried and I was like, oh, the
Yeah.
baby blues have hit, now I'm okay. And my mum had to be like, no, you're just tired, it's okay. Like you're okay, honey, like it's all good. But I was actually very lucky with Serena that like postpartum journey for her was actually quite like I healed quite well quite quickly and
Yeah.
kind of adjusted into my new routine quite quickly, which I
Yeah.
know can be quite difficult for some. So
Yeah. Amazing. And
yeah,
I mean, the baby blues doesn't get everyone, so to speak.
yes,
There are some, I guess, to word it a little bit differently, there are some risk factors that may make some people more prone to getting it. And it's good to be
yes,
aware, like you were. But I mean, in
yes,
your case, it sounds like you were basically told you were going to get it. So therefore,
yes.
you're waiting for it, which is creating more anxiety than being
That's
aware and
it.
keeping an eye out for potential signs. So,
That's
yeah.
it.
Oh,
And like
wow.
I
That's,
think because my mum had postnatal depression,
yeah. Hmm.
because
Hmm.
like I said, like she wasn't very maternal, so like, and my birth, well, like me, for my mum, uh, wasn't the smoothest for her,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
so I think I was waiting for, oh, okay, well, I know that quite often it can be a
Hmm.
like a genetic thing that you're more susceptible to these
Hmm. Yeah.
emotions or to these situations. But I was very blessed in the sense that I didn't have to do that. But I was also lucky in the sense that Luke kept, like, he had researched what does this look like and what would I need to do or who would I need to speak to if this is something that I begin to recognize is happening.
Yeah.
So
Oh, see,
I was
that's
very
amazing.
lucky.
Yeah, and see, that's amazing that your partner was being proactive and he was very involved in this because
Yes,
I think one of the hardest thing with baby blues is when you're in it, it's hard to see that you're having it. It can be
that's
difficult
it.
to recognize that you're having those feelings, but having someone from the outside, whether that's a midwife or your partner, they can actually kind of see, oh, you're just not quite yourself. And
That's
this
it.
could be the start of, and then therefore flag it, to you, or flag it to maybe a midwife if you're seeing one, in the first 6 weeks, and say, "Oh, I think this is happening. What can I do?" So that's
That's it.
amazing.
And learning that self-fulfilling prophecies aren't like, um, saying like, "Oh, I'm a terrible mother." That means if anything bad is to happen, you're like, "Oh, well, see, I knew that was going to happen."
Mm.
And so being able to go, nobody, regardless of, obviously, I've had Serena and then I've just had my son. You learn it all over again. Whole different child, whole different you.
Exactly.
And so no matter what, you're gonna make mistakes, I guess, in your own
Hmm.
mind, and learning that you know it's an adjustment to caring for another human being. It's not like you just
Of
go, oh,
course.
I've carried you, I've birthed you, and now I'm amazing. You are amazing, but it's going
Yeah.
to be overwhelming. So
Yeah. Of
being able
course.
to recognize that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's overwhelming for you as a mom, for the partner, the dad, the other mom. It's overwhelming for you two as a couple to try and find, your, I guess, your position, your spot, to try and find this place.
That's it.
It's overwhelming. There's obviously sleep deprivation does not help at any point.
That's
It's
it.
really difficult on everyone, and yeah, it's a transition. And even when you've been a mom to Serena and then you welcome your son, that's a new transition because obviously your routine's going to be different. You have a
That's
new
it.
person in the family, everything changes. Of course, it's all learning, and that's for everyone needs to learn
That's
to
it.
welcome this new member in the family and find a routine and find what works for them as a family, what works for every individual person within the family unit. It's yeah,
That's it.
it's a learning curve.
That's it. And I think everyone needs to know whether it's your first baby or your fifth baby. It's going to be an adventure. It's going to be an adventure.
Yep, it will be. Yeah, 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 yeah. So there's 8 years between your daughter and your son. Is that right?
Yes. Yep.
So
So
was your son's conception planned?
no. I'd actually had a half a year off from work due to illness, and
Hmm.
yeah, it was. I was actually last Christmas. I was sitting there, and I'd had one cruiser. I'd had a pineapple cruiser, and I thought, oh, that doesn't feel right. And I'm like, and
Hmm.
I don't drink often anyway,
Yeah.
but I thought, oh, a cruiser's like realistically nothing. I shouldn't be feeling ill. And I was like, this is weird. And so I'd mentioned it to Luke, and he was like, oh, well, Christmas is stressful. Like you don't really cope at Christmas. Like we'll see what's happening. And then I said to him on the 27th, I was like, oh, I actually haven't had my period for a while. This is weird. And he's like, oh, well, you know that they're a bit chop and changey, but I'll go
Hmm.
grab a test anyway. He's like, let's just
Yeah.
get a test. We'll check it out. And I was like, well, what happens if it's positive? And he was like, then we have another baby. Okay.
Hmm.
Like he was just like, and like, why is there a question mark? Um, yeah. And so we found out, yeah, on the 28th that we were expecting, and um, we were like, okay, cool. Well, this obviously isn't 13 weeks because it wasn't instantaneous. We had to wait for a result. So
Okay.
it was a whole different experience of actually being like, oh, I actually have to go to the doctor and they do a P test for you, and then go get an ultrasound and go get blood tests. Like
Yeah.
we missed all of that the first time round. So yeah, it was a very different experience. I actually experienced what most people experience with their
Hmm.
pregnancies.
Yeah, not
So
skipping the first trimester, but I mean, it's got its
yeah,
perks, obviously. But yeah, it's good to
yeah.
know as
Well,
well.
I think it was going to be. I wouldn't have been able to ignore it because I had such bad morning sickness up until
Oh,
like 18 weeks. I was so sick.
Oh.
I'm so glad I wasn't working because I would have had to stop working. Like, I was so ill.
Oh.
And I was just like, how can you be so grateful for like this little life and at the same time be like, I can't go. Like, I just want to sit down and eat dinner. Like, I lived off hydrolyte ice
Oh.
blocks pretty much and like
Oh.
crackers.
Oh.
Because otherwise I'd be like, nope, there's nothing in me.
Oh, that's difficult. No.
Yeah,
Oh.
but
Wow.
no,
So
very lucky.
so you were early, right, when you found out about your son.
Yeah, about 3 or 4 weeks.
Oh yeah, nice.
Yeah, so
How
really
did
early.
you feel? Obviously, your partner was really on board with having a second child.
Yeah,
What about you?
I was really excited, apprehensive but excited. I think
Yeah.
because I was apprehensive in the sense that I was like, oh my goodness, it's 8 years difference.
Yeah.
How is this going to affect my daughter?
Mm-hmm.
But like we had been saying since my daughter, like we'd love to have another child, but we don't think it's ever going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be for financial reasons or for other personal reasons or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, we didn't think it was going to happen.
Yeah.
Um, and I'd been off contraception for like almost 2 years, maybe 3 years. So we were like, well, obviously it's just not happening, and like
Yeah.
that's fine. We kind of had accepted that we might foster one day, or we might get a cat, like another
Yeah.
cat if it
Yeah.
was
Either
found.
or.
Uh, um, two very different things, but like the idea that if like if I felt like I needed to, you know, fulfill anything, that there were options
Yeah.
out there. And so finding out I was pregnant, I was like very, very excited.
Yeah.
But then also just like, well, this is going to be such a different adventure because I didn't know anybody else who had a massive age gap between their
Yeah.
children.
Mm-hmm.
It's like so
Wow.
some of them would have like maybe like 3 or 4 years, but yeah, definitely not 8.
Yeah, that's not common, but I mean, it doesn't
No.
mean it's not doable, right? Obviously, you're
No, that's
doing
it.
it, so yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So, when did you tell your daughter? Like, how far along were you?
I was 10 weeks.
And
So
how did she take it, react?
she'd been asking for the last 3 Christmases for a sibling. So on her Christmas
Right.
list, she'd write down a brother or a sister,
Mm-hmm.
and then she learnt the word sibling. And so, like the Christmas that had just gone, she'd written down sibling, and I'd had to explain to her, without going into specifics because she's 8.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, there's a process here that's not quite like just going to the mall and being like, that looks like a good baby.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I
We
see.
had to kind of explain like it's something that like my health would have to be in a good place in order for
Mm-hmm.
my body to be able to carry a baby, and there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
processes, and she was kind of
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, and kind of accepted it at face value.
Yeah.
So thankfully she didn't ask any other deeper questions. um so we told her at 10 weeks. We bought 3 little picture frames. We had a picture of herself,
Mm-hmm.
just like we'd gone to the sunflower fields,
Oh
so we
yeah.
put a picture of her there, and she was like, "Oh, this is beautiful. Like you can put it up in your room." And the frames kind of went inside of each other. There were 3 of them,
Mm-hmm.
and so we had the big one on top. So when she lifted it, it was herself, and she was like, "Oh, this is so cute." She's like, "Oh, there's another one." And she picked it up, and she was like, "Oh, it's us 3. I love us." And she's like, picked up the third one, and I think she was expecting it to be like of our pets. We have a dog and a cat.
Yeah.
And she's flipped it over, and she was like, "What is this?" It was an ultrasound of this little
Yeah.
tiny, bean. And she's looking at it, and she's looked at us, and she's looking at it, and she's like, "This looks like from Operation Ouch." It's like a medical show for kids. And she's like, "They had a baby, and that's what that looks like." And I was like, "Oh,
Oh.
what would happen if it was a baby?" And like we'd already kind of been hinting at her for a few weeks, like, "Hey, what would you keep asking for a sibling? What would happen if you had one? What would that
Mm-hmm.
look like? What would that feel like?" Kind of like prepping her for like, "Oh God, how is she going to react?"
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she was ecstatic. She was beyond happy, and the poor thing had to keep it a secret. We didn't tell anyone until I was like 18, 19 weeks. So
Oh, that's a long
it
time
was a long
for an
time.
8-year-old.
So yes. So she had one friend who knew because
Yeah.
her best friend, her mum, was 2 weeks behind me. So she found out
All
she was pregnant
right.
not long after I did, and she's 8 as well. So they were able to have
Oh,
a
there
little
you
bond. Although like
go.
her friend has a younger sister as well, but they
Yeah.
were able to
Mhm.
have that bond of, oh my goodness, our mums are pregnant at the same time. So she had
That's
one person who knew.
amazing. Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Oh, that is I love the way you prepared her. That is so it's so, gentle, and it's like just instead of, suddenly telling her that you're pregnant, you just hinted at it. You kind of like, I guess, take touch to see if, she would be
How
like,
she'd feel. That's it.
yeah, how
Well,
she'd feel.
because
And
it's hard being that she was obviously an only child for 8 years,
yeah,
so she has had all of our attention, and
that's
like,
right.
not that she wouldn't cope not having it, but being able to be like, oh well, I know you've been asking for this, but
Hmm.
are you prepared for what that reality is?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that's right.
and also, like, you see all these beautiful videos of people like surprising their kids, of like, oh, there's a shirt that says big sister and the kids are loving it, and then you've got other ones where the kids lose it and
Yeah,
they're not prepared, taken by surprise, and you just watch them freak out. And I was like, I do not want that to happen to Serena, because she's
yeah,
quite a sensitive. She's like very emotionally intelligent, but she's very, very sensitive.
yeah.
And so it's like, let's give her the warnings of planting the seeds so she can think about it, which meant that she would come up to us periodically and be like, oh, would this happen like this? Or if I
Hmm.
had a sibling, would this happen? What would
Hmm.
happen to me? Would I have to share my room? Like,
Yes.
little things that, like,
Yeah.
helping her, like, little 8-year-old brain comprehend and kind of mold to the fact that this might be something that might happen because mum's talking about it.
Yeah.
But
And
she
see,
just
that's
talked to it like a duck on water. She was so lucky.
that's beautiful. And you know her better than anyone, obviously. Same as Luke, obviously.
Yeah,
And yeah, that's just such a beautiful way. And the what you've just said as well is such, for anyone listening who may have a child who is older, and may be thinking about adding a new baby to the family. It's
yeah,
invaluable advice to just, the way you went about it, which, as you said, could be different from, other parents, but every parent knows their child, and they would know what is
that's
the
it.
best way
What they can
to,
handle. Yeah.
prepare them. Exactly. And yeah, that's invaluable, just insight into it. That's amazing. So then how did you go about this birth, and how did you prepare for this new birth, knowing what happened during the birth of Serena?
So it was interesting, the sense that, like, I'd always said to Luke, like, oh, I'd actually gone and met with the New Life Midwifery, which is the company I went through with my son. I actually met them when I was pregnant with my daughter,
Okay,
and
yeah,
that it just wasn't financially anywhere near possible for us. Like,
yeah,
even if we got a loan, it kind of, it wasn't going to be something that was possible for us at the
yeah,
time. And so I remember being so devastated then after Serena was born, being like, I wish we'd had the money. I wonder how it would have gone.
yeah.
And so I
Hmm.
said to him, well, if we had the money, or if we could find a way to have the money, even if they do a payment plan, could we look into a home birth?
Hmm.
Because there's now a lot of trauma connected to the hospital.
Yeah.
I've also got PTSD from an injury at work, and
Hmm.
so I was like, the hospital doesn't have a lot of nice memories and feelings for me. It causes a lot of
Hmm.
anxiety, and obviously the experiences with Serena. Serena knows about that. Like,
Hmm.
not that like, and we've always said to her, like, it's not her fault. Like, we don't regret having her. Like,
Yeah.
because she wanted to know about her birth.
Okay, yeah.
Um, but that she knew that it wasn't particularly an enjoyable experience for me.
Okay.
Um, and so we were still talking about, like, do we look into a home birth? Do we go to the hospital?
Hmm.
What should we do? And I'd actually called and they said, we have no availability. And I was like, cool,
Okay.
okay. What do I do? I went to my GP and I went, like, I don't want to birth at the same hospital. Can
Hmm.
I go through Martyr Mothers? Can I go through? I'll drive to Logan. I don't care. Like, I'll go somewhere. And he went, no, because of COVID, they've become really strict with their catchments. So
Oh, yeah.
your hospital, Zip's hospital, you have no choice. It's that, or you pay to go to a private hospital. And I was like,
Gosh.
I don't have private health.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
can't afford to just pay however
Yeah.
much money it is out of pocket to go to a private hospital. And
Hmm.
even then, I wouldn't have the same midwife or OBGYN or whatever it is at a hospital. Could it still run like a normal hospital? Whereas you'd have your like shift workers, or they might be on
Hmm.
holiday or
Yeah.
whatever. And so we were like, right, what do we do?
Exactly.
Just like
What do you do?
just panicked a little bit. And I rang again and I was like, look, is there a chance I can even just come in and chat to you? And if anything happens, like if it's a cancellation or you can kind of like squeeze me in for that month, that at least you know who I am and I can just like, I'll pay booking fees then and there. Like I'm ready if we match, if we're compatible. And they were like, oh, look, you can come in on a Tuesday afternoon. I was like, done. And on the Tuesday morning, I had a hospital appointment. And I was like, cool, this is my first time meeting with the hospital. I might actually go up there, and they're lovely. It's been 8 years. People change, policies change, experiences change. I know that a lot of people put in complaints from around the time that my daughter was born. Of like maybe feedback's been taken on board. And I was greeted with, my goodness, you're a bit obese. And I was like, oh, they have not changed. Yeah, no, they were like, what's your BMI? And I was like, you haven't even asked me how many weeks I am. You haven't, like, you've got, like, yeah, they have my file, but there's no, like, how's your pregnancy been? How are you feeling today? Like, nothing. It was straight away, I was 24 weeks. And they said, oh, well, maybe we should discuss, because you're so large, a C-section. And I remember just sitting there looking at this woman in pure shock and thinking, I must be mishearing things. Like, maybe I'm imagining a conversation right now because this can't be happening. And I remember being like, I'm so sorry to be rude, but excuse me. I beg your pardon. What are you saying to me? And she was like, oh, well, because, like, you know, your BMI, you're quite overweight. And I'm like, I've just seen my GP who said that I'm fine. I'm a curvy woman. I've got quite large breasts. I'm a double K. So none of that's taken into consideration when you got a BMI. Like, I'm, you know, so like 3 kilos each up here. So, you know, I'm like, sorry. You know, I'm like, so like, I was just in shock. And I'm like, you know, I'm thinner than what I was when I had my daughter. And my BMI was not brought up once. And so I'm like, is it because I'm 8 years older? Like, is that what's happening? Like, and I just sat there, and I remember like basically tuning out of half the appointment, thinking, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm not birthing here. I cannot trust you to keep myself safe and my daughter safe. Obviously, the interest of us just isn't here. And I tried to like imagine that, you know, the waiting room was very full. I'm like, maybe she's just trying to get to the point because the poor thing's exhausted. But there's only so many excuses you can make before being like, excuse me, that really hurt my feelings. Like, I'm 24 weeks. Like, it's not like there's anything right now that you should be worrying about. Like, I'd only just gone and got like the scan, like the dating scan or whatever. It's like the 20-week scan where you look at everything health-wise. Like, I've only just got the results back from that. Like, how are you discussing birth when you haven't even discussed my health? And so I left that and went to the mid.
Sorry, I just wanted to interrupt and say I love the way that you apologize to tell her that she was being rude. Like, can we just point that out? Because really, she was being rude to you, and there's no need to apologize at this point. And being judged on your size and making that a reason for C-section. I mean, that's interesting because the first time around it was you couldn't have a water birth because of your age, and now you can only have a C-section because of your size.
And that's why, like, I tried to. The reason I apologized because I thought, well, maybe I'm just overreacting. Like, maybe I've misheard her. Maybe she's having a bad day. I was like, well, maybe this is what, like, we need to discuss. Like, but I was like, but I'm like, excuse me, like, I'm barely holding it together here because I'm like so sick with morning. Like, I've only just become free of morning sickness to be able to leave the house, and this is the conversations I'm having. And then the total contrast of I went to the midwife that afternoon and met Trish. And I said to her, look, I'm so sorry, but this has just happened. And she got up and left the room for a minute. And I remember thinking, like, oh, where's she going? And she came back with a glass of water. And she goes, are you okay? Like, are you all right? Because she's like, I'm sorry. I'm not okay on your behalf. I'm disgusted. And the receptionist came in at that time to, like, hand off some paperwork and had overheard that last bit of the conversation. And she's like, that is not okay. And I'm really sorry that happened to you. And if we can't take you, I want you to know that wherever you go, do not accept that treatment.
Yeah.
And I knew just
And
then
see,
and there,
that's
I was like,
beautiful.
yep, I will fight tooth and nail to be able to come here because you guys have treated me with so much respect in the first 10 minutes of me meeting you. Yeah. And luckily they had one spot someone had just cancelled, and I was like, I'll pay booking today. I'm coming here. We'll find a way to pay it.
Wow.
So
Oh, that's amazing. I just love
it's
the,
fate.
the circumstances, and it's like, oh, yes, we do have a spot now. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, yes. Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Because I didn't realize how many like women that they take on for each month. And obviously, like, it's not something that obviously I would think about because I'm not in the medical field.
Yeah.
And like putting it into perspective, Trish had 8, I think she said like 7 or 8 kids within a 2-week period. And
Yeah,
so,
that's
like,
right. That's insane.
she would just she'd come to like she came to like the few appointments after River was born and sat on my lounge looking just knackered, but she was there because she wanted to be there to check on us. And I was like, you can go home, it's okay. Like, I'm all right. Like, look after you.
That's
Like,
insane.
yeah.
Oh wow. And that's the thing with, private midwives is I feel like that's a generalization, obviously. They've got such a big heart and they probably just want to take on everyone, right? But I mean there's a point where
Yeah.
they probably can't because then things like
That's
back to
it.
back birth happen and they're only human.
Yes.
They have
That's
to
it.
cope with the tiredness and the exhaustion and the mental load that is, birth that we don't realize because we're not medically trained and we're not, they're
That's
looking
it.
out for you. They're looking out for anything that, could happen. And they're also obviously they're very like alert. They have to be alert, right? And so the mental
That's it.
exhaustion from birth from the perspective of those midwives is crazy. Wow.
That's
The
it. And
work
that's
they
the
do
not taking
is
incredible.
yeah,
Just
it's
incredible, isn't it?
underrated as well. I want to say a midwife, regardless of
Yes.
whether they're private or they work in the public hospital system, they are underrated. I think it's a profession that is
Yep.
underrated and they're not appreciated for the
100%.
for their right value and for the work and the involvement they have and the compassion they have for women.
That's it. And also the fact that you don't always know that they're advocating for you
Yeah,
behind the scenes.
yeah,
And so,
that's right.
like, for myself, like, I had the hospital consistently making appointments and being like, you need to come to this, you need to come to this. And I'd already run the hospital and said, I'm going for a private midwife.
Mhm.
I'm going through all my appointments with a doctor or my midwife. I'm having
Yeah.
nothing to do with the hospital. If you feel like you have to have something to do with me, you can ring me at like 38 weeks and check on me and see how I'm going. But otherwise, I don't want to have these conversations. I don't feel respected or not appreciated. That's the wrong word. I just didn't feel safe there. I was like, this is
Yeah.
gonna it's not you, it's me.
Yeah.
Like, it's not gonna work between us. And
Yeah.
unbeknownst to me, they were like contacting my midwife and contacting the clinic, and they were behind the scenes advocating for me to say this is her choice. She's safe.
Yeah.
She's healthy. She's doing everything she should. Like, if you're needing reports for whatever reason, like these are
Mhm.
her reports, or like for what, like with consent, like can they send XYZ or whatever they
Mhm.
need if they
Mhm.
needed to.
Mhm.
Like all of that behind the scenes, which it's not necessarily a job they have to do. They could just be
No,
like, hey,
that's right.
the hospital's calling. Instead, they were
Mhm.
like, we know this is going to stress out Steph. Let's call on her behalf and advocate for her to be safe and
Wow.
respected. So,
That's Do you know I've never heard of a hospital like ringing up your private midwife or like constantly demanding that you come to appointments and you come do this when
yeah,
you've obviously not chosen them as a model of care. You've probably booked there in case of, or maybe
yeah,
you've booked at a different hospital. But when your primary model of care is, a private midwife, then obviously that private midwife is taking on your care. She's taking on,
that's it.
anything
Yeah,
that needs to be done. So the hospital doesn't need to be involved at this point.
that's it. And I have no idea why. I don't know if it was because they were like, oh, she's birthed through here before, or what. I don't know if it's because they
Yeah.
have on file that I've got PTSD because I've obviously been to the hospital with those sort of things. I'm like, maybe it's because that's on
Yeah.
file, and they're like, is she good? But yeah, the harassment of it and being like, I just started ignoring them. Because I was like, well, you can waste your time. That's okay. Because I don't have to participate in whatever game you're playing.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely didn't have to be something that they looked after me for, considering that, you know, you got to think about the fact that they have children of their own, they have families, they have,
Mm-hmm.
you know, some of them do things on the side or like
Mm-hmm.
aren't just a private midwife. They might also be a lactation consultant or
Yeah.
whatever else. And then they've also got to have time for their own personal life as well as all these women. And Trish would give me, obviously I had a private number, so if I ever needed her, she was like, call me, shoot me a text message, I will get back to you when I can. And she would have even like an appointment, she'd be like, oh, that's my phone vibrating, don't mind that, it's another mum, she's having a moment. Like, if she was just like, you know, always on call, I guess.
Yeah.
And you just think about the mental exhaustion that must have.
Yeah, that's
and yet
right.
she loved it.
That's right. And yeah, like that's exactly how it is. And I'm finding that midwives, you know, they will go above and beyond, right? Like, you know, Trish did for you. She's like, I'm always here for you. And like they don't have to, you know,
No,
she's
not at
obviously
all.
chosen to, but she's, you know, that's her personality. That's how she is, right? And she's just going above and beyond because that's how she is. And that's beautiful for, you know, the woman that they care for, like you, because you just get such a VIP experience compared to obviously your first birth. And you just, you know,
That's it.
you're heard and you listened to, and they obviously care a lot about you. And that's just amazing. The job they do is, it's amazing. It's hard to be
It
midwife.
is.
It's not easy. And they just, you know, they're exhausted and they come to work with a smile and they're like, yeah, let's
That's it.
do
And you have
this.
no idea how exhausted they are until they're like, oh, don't mind me if I forget things. I've just been at a birth all night. And you're like, why are you here? They're like, well, you've got your
Exactly.
appointment today. I can't not be here. And I'm like, oh, I would have understood. They're like, well, no, that's our job. And I was like, oh, okay.
Wow. It's
That's
insane.
awesome.
Yeah, that
Like,
is.
yeah.
Wow. So
And I think
obviously, so
that's the
you,
difference being woman first. That was
that's
what Trish
right.
said. Woman first. Yeah.
Wow. So beautiful. That is so beautiful. So obviously you connected really well with Trish.
Yes. Yeah.
How did you prepare for this birth? You know, with Trish, did she help you? Did she give you some, I guess, education? How was that?
Yeah. So any question I had, I could go to
Yeah.
her with. And the thing is that we took Serena to a lot of midwife appointments if it was
Hmm.
possible.
Yeah.
And she answered any and all questions Serena had. Anything
Amazing.
at all. Because Serena wanted to be a part of it, and she was.
Yeah.
Um, and so even like silly things about being like, oh, you know, I've heard stories that some women, you know, poo during labor. If it's a thing at home, like, what do you do? She's like, you just sort it and be done. Like, what are you worrying about? I was like, oh, okay. But they also had resources on hand. So they were like, hey, what works best for you? Podcasts? Do you prefer books? Do you prefer audiobooks? Do you prefer trying to see, like, paying to go to classes? And they would give
Hmm.
you all the resources you want. So I read Gentle Mothering. I read
Hmm.
3 or 4 other books. And a lot of them, Trish was like, I think this chapter might work for Luke. So do you want to make sure Luke has a look at this chapter to try and
Amazing.
ensure that Luke has support,
Yeah.
and any questions Luke had, she was willing to answer. They also had birth prep through the midwives. So every
Hmm.
second Wednesday, there'd be some sort of topic.
Yeah.
And at any stage of your pregnancy, even if you were, you know, in labor that day, if you wanted to go to class, you could.
Hmm.
And there were all sorts of things from perineal massage to, you know, to lactating, to expressing, to what does different labor look like what different laboring positions. Like, there was just so much information available to the point that
Hmm.
sometimes it was too much, and you
Yeah.
were like, I'm not coming this week because I just need to lie down. Um,
Yeah.
but like, they would always have things available, and if
Yeah.
I was worried about certain things, she would find journal articles or research to
Hmm.
give me to investigate myself,
Hmm. Amazing.
and was very much like, these are your decisions, these are your choices. Cause I was like, oh, what do you think about this? And she's like, I can't choose that for you. This
Oh,
is my
amazing.
thoughts, but what works best for you, your body, for Luke, for Serena, will
Yeah.
depend on your dynamic. So
Oh,
Chalk and cheese between pregnancies in regards to education.
oh wow. That just sounds so good because I feel like that's
Was
how it should be. You've got access to information.
yes,
You can take on as much or as little as you want or as you need. And obviously, your need for information changes throughout your pregnancy. Maybe in the third trimester, you want a lot more than you do in the second. And that's, and you just, she meets you where you're at. So if you're not ready for info, you just can't take it on, then that's how it is. Whereas if you're actively asking for it, then she's got the resources, she's got the answers for you
that's it.
without making any decisions for you. Because as she said, it's your body. She can't make decisions for you. She can tell you, she can give you her opinion. She can say, we would recommend this or you could do this. But the final say is yours. And that's beautiful.
That's it. And she was
Wow.
very much wanting to make sure, she kept saying, Steph, the power is yours. You
Amazing.
are in charge of your body. You are in charge of your birth. She's like, we're here to support you. Have your child. That is our role here. It's not to tell you what you're doing is right or
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
wrong.
mm-hmm.
It's not to tell you anything. The only thing we're here to do is to ensure your health and the health of your child. And that was so healing to be like,
Yep.
oh, I've got this. Like, this is my time to
Mm-hmm.
be that powerful mother that you envision yourself to be when you are going to go into labor and have your baby.
Wow. That's refreshing to hear. That just sounds so good. So, how was the weeks and days leading up to River's birth?
Interesting. I can't remember the term for it, but essentially fake, like false labor. Essentially, I can't remember the term
Oh,
for it. Where we kept thinking I was going into labor for 2 weeks,
oh,
up until the day that I had, up until the day I had him. So I
oh,
had River at exactly 42 weeks. It was on a Thursday.
oh,
Um,
nice.
and I remember like freaking out to Trish. I was like, I can't go past 40 weeks, and she was like, why? Your body will tell you when you're ready. She's like, if you reach like 43 weeks, maybe we'll just check everything's okay. She's
Mm-hmm.
like, but people give birth all over the world at different times.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like there were days where I was like, today's the day. I'm like in so much in pain, like you know what I mean. Like when you're
Oh,
in labor,
yeah.
I was like, it feels like everything's happening, and she'd be like, okay, well, has your mucus plug happened? Like, has this happened? Have you had waters? Have you had these sensations? Um, and there were certain things that had happened and certain things that hadn't. And I was like, oh well, no, that hasn't happened yet.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, right, well, let's just see how you go, how the day progresses. Um, the one thing she told me that was helpful, she's like, do not track your contractions.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, until we know for sure you're in labor, there is no point. You're going to cause yourself
Mm-hmm.
anxiety
Okay.
and then potentially stall anything that is happening. And that was just
Mm-hmm.
mostly because of my mental health and things.
Yeah, and she knew
Um,
you. Yeah.
yes. And she was also like, she's trauma informed. So she's done training to make sure that if she has to work with any mothers who have mental health, who have additional needs or anything like that, that she's
Mm-hmm.
able to step up and support them to the best of her ability,
Amazing.
which is just amazing. And so, yeah, I remember being like, it's happening today, it's not happening today. And then,
Oh.
like, there were certain times that it got to my due date. So the 20, what was my due date? 20, sorry, 22nd of August was my original, and then we realized it was actually 25th. But um, Luke was home for that day because I was like, I'm in labor. Like, this is what this feels like. I've read all the books. I've listened to all the podcasts, all the audio books. Like, I've watched all the movies, all the documentaries. This is the signs. And we were like, yep, cool, this is happening. We won't ring Trish until we're certain this is happening.
Yeah.
And Serena stayed home from school, got to about 2 o'clock, and it all fizzled out. And I was like, no, what do you mean? Like, this is meant to happen today. Like, what's happening? And yeah, that happened for 2 weeks. And so what happened is that I, on the 7th, technically the 8th actually, but yeah, at 3 a.m. on the 8th of September, I woke up and I was like, oh, I need to go to the loo. And that evening, I'd said to Luke, I need darkness. Didn't know
Mhm.
what it was. I'm like, I just need to be in the room. I don't want noise. I don't want anything. I just want the dark. I need to be in the dark, under the blanket, and just pretend I'm
Mhm.
not here. And he was like, yep, cool. Trish has told me this is a thing that pregnant women do sometimes. They need to find,
Mhm.
dark, small spaces sometimes to feel safe. I'll leave you to it. So
Mhm.
I woke up and it's pitch black. And I've gone to get out of the room and I couldn't find the door handle. I couldn't find the light. And then my waters broke. And so Luke woke up to me just sobbing because I was wet and I was in the dark. I didn't know what was happening. I was half asleep. And he was like, oh, darling, okay. He's like, he's like, we won't call Trish yet, but we'll just keep an eye out because I think your waters have broken. That's what this looks like. Go for a shower and relax. It's okay. And so had a shower, came back to bed, slept until like 8 o'clock, and
Mhm.
we brought Serena into the bedroom and said, we think it's happening officially today.
Mhm.
We think mummy's in labour. And she was like, awesome. Okay, what do we need to do? We'd already set up the birth pool. Like, there was no water in it, but like it had been pumped up.
Yeah.
We had all the affirmations on the wall. The fairy lights were up. The candles were there ready. Like the space was ready. And she's like, I'll make sure that I haven't left any shoes in the lounge room. Like, she was ready. And then it got to about 10 o'clock, and we were like, oh, look, the sensations aren't intensifying yet. And so
Mhm.
we gave her the option, do you want to go to school? Because I think there was book week from memory.
Oh yeah.
And so,
Mhm.
do you want to go to school and do all the activities? And if anything happens, we will come and get you. Like, Dad
Mhm.
will race over and come and get you. And she was like, yep, cool. So I slept for the majority of the day, rang Trish, and I was like, look, I think my water's broken. And I'm not feeling any difference in movements in a negative way. I'm just feeling
Mhm.
different movements. And like I
Mhm.
said, I hadn't experienced early labor with my daughter because the hospital
Mhm.
said, come up at 8 o'clock. I had a piece of toast, went up there, had all the interventions, and then had a baby. So I had
Mhm.
none of this uncertainty of like, is this a contraction? Like,
Mhm.
any of that. And so Trish went, look, go for like, I'd had a ultrasound booked for that day because
Mhm.
the hospital was saying we need a scan. And being 42 weeks, she's like, let's just shut them up and like send you for a scan. So went to that scan and I was like, I'm definitely in labor. I can barely walk. The poor
Mhm.
man his name was Neil, the man who was doing my ultrasound. He felt so bad because he's like, I'm sorry, I have to just check everything because my placenta early in the pregnancy had been covering down the bottom.
Yeah.
And so they were
Covering your
like,
cervix. Yeah.
that's the word. Sorry, I forgot the word. um, And then thankfully, like, it all moved up and it was fine. But
Yeah.
they just wanted to double check everything was safe and
Yeah.
in the right spot. And and it took probably an extra 10 minutes to try and get through this poor ultrasound. Like, I'm just lying there, like, I don't know what I'm
Wow.
feeling, but I'm not comfortable. And the man was like, "Is there anything I could? Do you want a drink of water?" Like, I had to stand up at one stage and just lean on the wall to like try and
Oh.
get my breath because I was like, I can't be on my back. I need to be moving.
Yep.
And so he's like,
Mhm.
if you stand where you are, I can actually get to where I need to on the side. I'll never forget him. His name was Neil. He was a wonderful man, just
Oh,
wonderful.
amazing.
He even walked me down to the car, and he was like, I could not walk. I was like, it's happening. So we left the ultrasound, driving to my daughter's school. I'm in the car, just like in a zone of, I think this is labor. I'm just keeping things peaceful and happy, and
Mhm.
we're listening to like tunes and singing along to the radio. Yeah, got my daughter, and I said to her, Mum's having this baby. I am
Mhm.
having this baby today. Come
Mhm.
hell or high water, this is happening. And she was like, awesome. Okay, cool. Like, is it still okay if I like am part of it? And I was like, yep, awesome. Our original plan was she wanted to be in the water with me
Mhm.
until it came time to pushing. And then
Okay.
she was
Yeah.
like, I'm out of there. She's
Mhm.
like, I don't want to see any of that, I don't think. And I'd said
Mhm.
to her, if you want to stay for the whole thing, you can. If you don't, I'm not going to force you to stay.
Yeah.
I'm not going to
Good.
make anyone look at that. Like you're 8. That might not be something you want to see. And yeah, it's a 10-minute drive home from Serena's school, and we have to go around a lot of corners. And I remember
Oh.
I was saying there was one last corner before we got home, and I said to Luke, no more corners. I do not want any more corners. You need to like, and he's like, sweetheart, we live on a curve. There's going to be one last corner. I physically can't make it go straight without driving through houses. I'm so sorry. So we got upstairs. I was on the birth ball, and Luke's like, I'm just going to go make sure we have all the towels ready and everything.
Mhm.
Do you want to call Trish? And so Serena actually called Trish for me. and I was having a contraction, and so Serena's like, "Hi, Trish, it's Serena. I think Mum's gonna have the baby." And then she was, because of all the weeks leading up with stop and start, she was like, "Oh yeah, like, can you put the phone near Mum and I'll listen to her breathing?" And she went, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna get dressed and pop over because it sounds like Mum's gonna have this baby." And yeah, that was at 4:30, and then I was like, "Yep, it's starting," and I had my son by 7:02. That was it. It was like, "Yep, this is labour. Let's get started." So I was only in the water for an hour and a half.
Wow. I mean, you had
So
pre-labor for like 2 weeks. So really, at this
I
point,
was prime. Yep.
yes, I mean, labor at this point could only just go for a short time, really, because you've done the hard work before. Wow.
That's it. But I was really lucky in the sense that Trish and Luke, like, were making sure the water was the right temperature.
Yeah.
I was in the bedroom with Serena, and we were just rocking together to music and singing together. And we'd given Serena a list of affirmations that
Yeah.
the Trish had given us. So things like, "I trust my body, I trust my baby, I am
Yeah.
safe," those sort of things. And so Serena had chosen 3 or 4 that she thought were the best.
Yeah.
And so she was saying them to me, and we were just in the dark in my room, just kind of rocking together and just having a really peaceful, like, it wasn't comfortable, but I wasn't like necessarily in pain, I think, because I was just so zen.
Yeah.
And it was such a bonding experience for Serena, being like, "Oh, this is what labor is.
Yeah.
Labor is, you might be screaming because you're in pain the whole time, or you might be chill up until the point."
Yeah.
And so she got in the pool with me, and she was helping Trish with the mirror to like check, like, is your brother coming yet? How is Mum feeling? Help pour water on my back. Luke was outside of the pool just holding my hands because I was rocking on my hands and knees.
Yeah.
And kind of just not there. I was off with the fairies. I was in such like a. It honestly felt like, I said to Luke after I'd given birth, that I was like, there must have been 10 minutes between contractions. And he was like, "No, you were in the water for like an hour and a half at maximum." He's like,
Wow.
"You were pretty much, we got in there going and going." He's like, "But you were just in such a state of your body, you were trusting your body, and you knew what was happening, that it wasn't scary necessarily, I think." And Serena had been prepared. We'd watched videos and podcasts and stuff for her about the different sounds that can happen in labor.
Yeah.
So some women might make no sound, some women might scream and be at the top of their lungs and just be losing it, and that's okay. Other people deal with their body and their experiences differently. And so I'd said to her, I remember yelling in her labor, and I had an epidural and couldn't really feel anything. So I said to her, like, "Be prepared. I do not know what noise is going to come out of Mummy's mouth." She was like, "Yep, okay, cool. Righto. If you yell, I'll just tell you your affirmations." And I was like, "Fabulous, you sweetheart." Like, you are perfect in every way. And
Wow.
I yelled twice. In that transition stage where you're like, "I can't do it. I can't do this." And that one moment of doubt crept in, and I was like, maybe I should be in a hospital because I don't know what I'm doing. And Trish said to me, "You know your body. You have trained yourself for this. You know your body. Women instinctively know what to do, and they all freak out at some point, and then they just get down to business. You will be okay." And I remember thinking, no, I don't think I can. And she was like, "Serena's in the pool with you. She's ready." And that was enough for me to go, oh, I need to stop freaking out. I know what I'm doing. And also, what I'm doing is normalizing birth for my daughter.
Definitely.
Labor is not this scary thing. Like, it's scary in the sense that there's things that happen and it's an adventure, but bringing life into the world shouldn't be this really scary thing that no one talks about and is taboo, and that children shouldn't be a part of. And so, River started crowning, and Trish had gotten Serena to place the mirror, and Trish actually said, "I think that's your brother's head. I think your brother's on the way." And so, I got to feel his hair And I was like, oh my God, it's happening. He's coming. And so Serena was like, Mum, you can do this. And so, I was just surrounded by the fairy lights, and it started storming. So it was storming while I was in the water. So just listening to the rain, and we had a playlist playing with like songs that Serena and I had chosen together.
Mhm.
So when like Rivers when he first like his head first came out, he actually opened his eyes and looked at Serena like in the mirror. So they actually made a little eye contact as he was like being born. So Serena has this memory of not only was she
Wow.
there for the whole experience, but the first person that he saw was her.
That is
So
so special.
yeah, he
Oh,
came out and like I think maybe 2 pushes later, picked him
oh,
up and grabbed him, and Serena helped me hold him in the water. So
oh,
it was just
wow.
this. I can't even describe the difference
Yeah,
in being able to have that skin to skin,
yeah.
for starters, like
Mhm,
holding him on my
mhm.
chest, but having Serena there, like obviously my part, like Luke was there and he was a part of everything,
Of course.
but it's different being able to share that moment with my daughter and saying like, this is your brother and you've helped every single step of the way.
Wow.
So I'm a bit emotional by it.
No, of
Like,
course, of course. Wow.
and so the bond that they have is incredible.
Yeah, wow.
So
That is so beautiful. And as you said, this was something that I was going to mention, and you touched on it before. The birth education you've given Serena, because you've explained, like you and Trish, and obviously Luke as well, you've explained to her in terms that she can understand, that makes sense to her, what birth is and what is going to happen, and you've prepared her for 9 months. And then you've obviously given her space to be present or not and do the things that she feels comfortable with.
yeah,
And then for her to be comfortable, be in the pool with you, and witness you, and give you like such power, because she may not realize that, but she's given you probably strength back when she said, Mom, you can do it. And you
yes,
think, yeah, of course I can.
recenter yourself. Yep,
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. And so now she can know that birth doesn't have to be scary. It can look different to the movies. Um, and I can
yep,
do it on my own terms. I can do it, yes, you might have screamed during her labor, but then during River's labor, you didn't. So true birth
yep,
can look very different. Um,
yep,
and this is what you can do in your labor. You can have affirmations, you can be in the pool, you can be on the ball, you can listen to music,
yep,
and that's just so beautiful. Wow, what a
yeah.
special gift you've given her. That's incredible.
But like, I think that's what I say to people when like I've spoken to a few people who've been like, oh, well, they would love to have another child, but there's that
Yeah,
big age gap.
yeah,
And I've said that if she was 4, it might be a bit different because
yeah.
obviously that's a whole different level of emotional understanding and intelligence there. But being that we followed her lead, like what did she
That's
feel
right.
comfortable doing? What does she want?
Yeah,
What did she want to learn?
yeah.
Um, and like what did she feel comfortable doing? So she'd already discussed with Trish, for example, cutting the cord. So that was Serena's job.
Amazing.
She did all the steps that like stereotypically your birth partner does.
Yeah,
Um, so like the cutting of the cord or helping like hold bub with like while mum does whatever. So I went for a shower for 5 minutes. Like I say 5 minutes would have been like a minute. Um, just to you're in a birth pool, so just to help make sure you're a bit clean.
mm-hmm.
And he fell asleep on her, and so she's the
Oh,
first person to have gotten him to sleep. So
oh,
the bond that they have because she was
yeah,
able to have those opportunities. Not
yeah.
that someone whose child is older and doesn't want to participate wouldn't have those opportunities, but just that she's had the opportunity to do those things. And
Yeah.
so she knows that it's okay
Mm-hmm.
for if she wants children in the future. She said that she doesn't know if she wants kids yet.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm like, that's fine. You're 8.
Yep. That's
um,
perfectly okay.
I'm like, please think about it for a few more years. Um,
Yep.
that she was like, it's okay. if I want to do it at the hospital or if I want to do it at
Yep.
home or
Mhm.
whatever else, because she knows that these things happen.
Yeah.
And then she was able to, she talks about it to anybody who'll listen, that she feels powerful that she was able to be part of that
Yeah.
experience.
And that is
And
so
it
powerful.
and it really has healed for Luke and I
Oh,
her
amazing.
birth. It's
Yeah.
given back that power of, as a woman, you can trust your body.
Yeah.
You can trust that your body is capable of doing things, that your mind is capable of doing things, and
Mhm.
that it really does come down to, if you trust your body and
Yeah.
you trust your baby,
Mhm.
that miracles happen. Good things happen.
Wow. Oh, that is so beautiful. That is, and I'm so happy for you that it was healing and that it
Thank you.
gave you your power back, because it was taken away from you. And yeah, the fact that you got it, you took it back. It wasn't given back to you. You
Yes.
took it back. You took charge of this birth and you had a voice the whole time. And Trish was there to facilitate it, not to give it to you. And that's beautiful. And
Yes, yeah.
then, oh, wow.
But yeah, very lucky.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. So how is this postpartum journey going with River?
Amazing, really.
Oh, great.
We've tried doing the 40 days, or the golden
Yep.
40 or whatever it's called. So
Yep.
staying at home for as long as possible, not having as many visitors.
Yep.
Obviously the grandparents came and met Bub, and we've had a few people meet him. Um,
Yep.
but not rushing to have our
Mm-hmm.
space or our time
Yep.
interrupted, and being able to spend as much quality time just being a new family.
Oh,
So
amazing.
it's been great.
Wow. That is amazing. Wow. Wow. And I'm in awe of your story. It's so beautiful, and it's so it just it's empowering, and and the gift you've given to Serena to be able to just go, this is what birth is like. It's amazing. Wow.
Thank you.
I'm just yeah, I'm just thinking about it and I'm like, wow, that's dreamy, really. Wow. It's what
Yeah,
dreams are made of.
I think it's just good knowing that, you know, obviously I'm biased because I'm like, it's amazing. Like, this is just such an amazing story. But knowing that the other women I've spoken to who have other children who are now going, maybe like my son or my daughter or, my child can be a part of this
Mhm.
experience, and knowing you're not going to traumatize them. You just
Yeah.
put it in terms they understand, put them in,
Yeah.
give them opportunities for
Mhm.
those, and then,
Yeah.
yeah, have those
Yeah.
experiences together.
Yeah, and you would know your child better than anyone else. So you know how they may or may not react, and and as you said with Serena, you've given her the opportunity to be there or not. She had the option. She didn't have to stay. She chose to be there, and she was comfortable being there, probably because you had prepared her really well. But obviously, when I say you, I mean you and Luke, and Trish as well. And she knew what was happening. She was part of the process. She knew what to do, and she obviously felt really comfortable being in this space and watching her brother come into the world. And and I mean, it is doable. You've just got to meet your child where they're at, and know, for
That's
example,
it.
you said Serena is more sensitive, so you've adjusted to that. And another 8-year-old obviously might be really different, so you talk in a different way, or you do things differently, and you just meet the child where they're at, and do things
That's it.
accordingly. So yeah, so grateful for your story. It's amazing. Wow, it's been such a you've told it in such a beautiful way, and I'm sure the listeners will really like. There's a lot of messages you've sent that are just so powerful, and being able to give this insight into what it's like to have a baby when you have an older child who is school age, and 8 years old in this case, is invaluable, because as you said, it's not that common. It's obviously not rare, but
Yes. Yeah.
there is probably less information around, and that's a beautiful testimonial. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast and
So
giving me
thank you for
almost
having
2
me.
hours of your time.
Thank you for listening to me ramble.
I've loved every second of it. I could ask for more, but I know at some point you have to get back to your mum life.
That's it.
Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to get notified of when a new episode comes out, please subscribe to this show on your podcast listening platform. Also, I would really appreciate it if you could leave me a review on Apple Podcast or share this episode so that other moms can find it. If you would like to tell your own pregnancy, birth, or parenting story, please head to the show notes and you will find a form there to get in touch with me. Again, thank you so much for listening, and I will be with you again next week for a new episode.